What up, YouTube? Here with another episode of Talk Boxing. On this episode, I will be giving y'all my personal pound for pound rankings. This is new and updated, and as well as I will be giving y'all my post-fight thoughts on all the fights that happened tonight. And I hope y'all enjoy this episode of Talk Boxing. And as well as I want y'all to go hit the link to support this channel. It will be very much appreciated. And as well as y'all could go follow me on other platforms. As I said, links in the description box below. The first topic of matter, that being my own personal pound for pound rankings. This is a new and updated pound for pound rankings. As y'all see, I have at number 1 Terence Crawford, who made history last Saturday, being the only two-time undisputed champion in 2 different weight classes in the modern era. The only male boxer to do that in the modern era. And he did that by defeating who was the majority champion at welterweight, who was considered the best welterweight, who was evenly matched and was considered on the same level as Terence Crawford. And when they actually got in the ring last Saturday, Terence Crawford showed that he was in a league of his own. And matter of fact, on that night at least, Errol Spence was not on the same level as Terence Crawford. And he made an emphatic statement proving that he is the best welterweight. And from my perspective, I say he is the best fighter in the sport of boxing currently. And this is very much deserved that Terence Crawford gets ranked as the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world right now. He's been considered that for a very long time. The biggest criticism he's been faced with is the lack of quality of opponents that he's faced thus far. All that was cleared away after last Saturday when he defeated Errol Spence via 9th round TKO and became the undisputed welterweight champion. And he is the current number 1 pound for pound fighter on my list. And then at number 2, there's the former undisputed bantamweight champion who won the World Boxing Super Series tournament when it was competed during 2019, where Naoya Inoue was fighting amongst the bantamweights, and he proved himself as the best bantamweight after he won that tournament. And then last year he became the undisputed bantamweight champion, and then he decided this year that he would vacate his undisputed bantamweight crown and move up to super bantamweight. And in his debut fight at super bantamweight, he challenged the most notable fighter, the only unified champion at super bantamweight, Stephen Fulton. And that was last Tuesday. And he made an emphatic statement in his debut fight at super bantamweight. Now he's not only the unified super bantamweight champion. I actually have to make a correction because there is still only 2 current unified super bantamweight champions. Naoya Inoue, after he knocked out Stephen Fulton in his debut fight at super bantamweight and became the WBC and WBO super bantamweight champion. And then after the fight, during the post-fight interview, the only other champion at super bantamweight who was also a unified super bantamweight champion, the IBF and WBA super bantamweight champion, Marlon Tapales, who's from the Philippines, and he is not undefeated. He's not as young and fresh as Naoya Inoue, and I say he's less notable than Stephen Fulton, and that's why many people don't know a lot about Tapales, because he fights mostly over East in Asia, and that's why people in the Western Hemisphere and the Americas don't know too much about him. However, as I said during the post-fight interview, there was a face-off with Tapales and Inoue promoting that would be the next fight to determine who will be the undisputed super bantamweight champion. It looks like that will be Naoya Inoue's next fight to hopefully become a 2-time undisputed champion in 2 different weight classes. And Naoya Inoue, the hard-hitting unified super bantamweight champion, is ranked number 2 on the current pound-for-pound rankings. And at number 3, I have the current, or I don't know if he has vacated his undisputed lightweight titles. He did announce that he will be moving up to super lightweight to challenge the WBC super lightweight champion Regis Progress in his next fight coming up in October, and that is Devin Haney, the undisputed lightweight champion. He has talked about how he has trouble making weight at lightweight, hence why he's moving up to super lightweight, and he's going to be challenging arguably the best champion at super lightweight in his debut fight at super lightweight. And Devin Haney, being an undisputed champion in what is considered to be the most competitive division in all of boxing, that in itself is impressive. And he had 2 spectacular back-to-back performances when he defeated George Kambosos to become the undisputed lightweight champion, and he totally outclassed George Kambosos to become the undisputed champion. And then in his first defense in the rematch versus George Kambosos, he performed greatly once again. And then in his last fight versus Vasily Lomachenko, a former unified lightweight champion, he had a very close competitive fight versus him in what many people considered a questionable victory. And I know many people want to see another fight with Devin Haney and Vasily Lomachenko, and hopefully in the future we can see that. Now, I don't know if Vasily Lomachenko wants to move up to super lightweight because he is a fighter who started fighting at featherweight, and when he was fighting during the amateurs, he fought at a bantamweight and super bantamweight, and he's considered a little guy at lightweight. So for him to attempt to move up to super lightweight to fight Devin Haney again would be a very much of a leap for Vasily Lomachenko in his frame. However, if Devin Haney does want to clear up all the questions in the air amongst the boxing fans and the critics, that would definitely be a fight that many fans will want to see again. And Devin Haney did say during the post-fight follow-up after his fight versus Lomachenko, and he did say prior to that fight as well, the only reason why he stuck around at lightweight is to have that potential mega fight that many boxing fans and the general public want to see, and that's that fight versus Shakur Stevenson, the former unified super featherweight champion who recently in his last fight made his debut at lightweight. And we saw after the Haney-Lomachenko fight, Shakur Stevenson make an appearance and teasing that potential bout that many people want to see with Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson. And with Devin Haney announcing officially that his next fight will be at super lightweight for the title at that weight class, I don't know how those potential fights with either Shakur Stevenson and Vasily Lomachenko is looking right now. And there are some marquee matchups that Devin Haney can have to climb up amongst the ranks in the pound-for-pound top spots in the sport of boxing. There's Regis Progress, as I said, who is arguably the best fighter at 140. And then there's Teofimo Lopez. Now, he's been, I say, playing with the boxing fans of teasing a retirement. He's done stuff like this before, and honestly, Teofimo Lopez pulled off what is arguably the best performance of his career when he defeated Josh Taylor in his last fight to become the lineal super lightweight champion. I say it's either Regis Progress or Teofimo Lopez who is the best fighter at super lightweight. And if Devin Haney can get through Regis Progress in his next fight in October, Devin Haney did say he wants to have that fight happen with him and Teofimo Lopez. And when Teofimo Lopez was a unified lightweight champion, these two have been teasing a fight with each other ever since then. And as I said, Devin Haney, I currently have him ranked at number 3 in the current pound-for-pound rankings. And I say he's fought a good list of opponents. His resume is impressive. And for him to become the undisputed champion at lightweight, one of the most competitive divisions in the sport, and him to move up to super lightweight, where it is also very competitive and got a healthy scene out there, is a good look for Devin Haney. And this adds on to him ranking up or trying to rank up amongst the top of the sport. And then at number 4, I have the current undisputed super welterweight champion, Jermell Charlo. He's been a household name at super welterweight for quite a while now. He's fought the toughest competition at super welterweight, and he became the undisputed super welterweight champion in his last fight when he cleared up all the questions in the air from his first fight versus Brian Castano, where it ended in a draw. And many people, including myself, thought that Brian Castano should have won that fight. And then in the rematch, Jermell Charlo would clear away all doubts when he stopped Brian Castano in the rematch to become the undisputed super welterweight champion. And earlier this year, he was scheduled to take on the number 1 contender in his first defense as the undisputed super welterweight champion. That number 1 contender being Tim Tszyu, who is a up-and-coming prospect, undefeated fighter, a second-generation star coming out of Australia, who's been making noise and climbing up amongst the ranks in not only the super welterweights, however, in all of boxing. And Tim Tszyu being an undefeated fighter that's been getting a lot of notoriety amongst the boxing fans and the general public, especially out there in Australia. That would have been a marquee matchup, the best possible matchup that the super welterweight division can produce. Unfortunately, Jermell Charlo, when they were scheduled to fight earlier this year, has suffered a hand or arm injury during his training camp, hence why that fight didn't come to fruition. However, it has been announced that Jermell Charlo, instead of defending his undisputed super welterweight title for the first time, he will be fighting another undisputed champion, the cash cow, the most notable name in the sport of boxing, that being Saul Canelo Alvarez, next month in a super middleweight title bout. It'll be Canelo Alvarez defending his super middleweight title, the undisputed super middleweight title that he's held for quite a while now. And Jermell Charlo, he could fluctuate from 154 to 168. He didn't fight at 160 because his twin brother, Jermell Charlo, who's been inactive, who's been suspended from boxing due to outside of the ring activities, he's still the current WBC middleweight champion. And I know Jermell Charlo has been voicing his frustration about him not being able to get the best fights possible, how he wants to become undisputed champion just like his brother as well. However, he's got stuff to work on, and then he's got to get back into action for him to fulfill that conquest. And as I was saying before, elaborating on that, Jermell Charlo doesn't fight at middleweight, which he probably can make that weight at 160 better than he can make weight at 154 if he agreed to move up to 168 to have that fight versus Saul Alvarez next month. Then it's because him and his brother don't fight each other, and if they fight at 2 different weight classes, they won't clash. And Jermell Charlo, him fighting at a higher weight class, it would have made more sense if Jermell Charlo would have moved up only one division to challenge for the undisputed super middleweight title. However, he's inactive. For the first time ever in the modern era, we get to see two undisputed champions fight each other, and it would be impressive if Jermell Charlo can pull off what many people would consider a upset next month if he can defeat Canelo Alvarez, and he will be the only two-time undisputed champion to hold all the titles in two different weight classes. Now, he wouldn't be the first ever male boxer in the modern era to become the undisputed champion in two different weight classes. However, he would be the only male boxer or only boxer in history in the modern era to hold two undisputed crowns in two different divisions simultaneously at the same time. And I currently have Jermell Charlo at number 4 in the current pound-for-pound rankings. And then at number 5, I have the former unified welterweight champion Errol Spence ranked at number 5 just because he took the worst loss and his only loss in his professional career does not make Errol Spence any less of a fighter. He's still a high-level, high-caliber fighter, and we shouldn't take credit away from Errol Spence and his ability to perform at a high level, being a high-level fighter in the sport of boxing. And he still has a lot of potential. He did say that he wants to cash in that rematch clause versus Terence Crawford. I did say during my post-fight reaction video that I wouldn't suggest for Errol Spence to have another fight versus Terence Crawford, especially after what we saw in their fight last week. However, if Errol Spence, as a competitive fighter that we know him as, wants to avenge his only loss versus Terence Crawford, hopefully he preps himself better, and hopefully for his sake he performs better in a rematch if that does in fact happen in his next fight. And after that, Errol Spence would still be considered one of the top welterweights if he decides to stay fighting at welterweight. And if he does move up to super welterweight, I'm sure he will be fighting amongst the top level fighters at super welterweight as well, which would have him considered to be amongst the top contenders at super welterweight as well. And then at number 6, I have the current undisputed super middleweight champion, Saul Canelo Alvarez. He's been the cash cow of the sport of boxing ever since the post-Floyd Mayweather-Manny Pacquiao era. Worldwide, internationally, globally speaking, I would say he's the most notable fighter, the most recognizable name out there to come out of the sport of boxing. He had, I would say, impressive performance in his last fight versus John Ryder. John Ryder isn't the highest level fighter at super middleweight. However, I would put him there amongst the top 10 ranked fighters at super middleweight. He is a notable fighter. He is a decent quality fighter, and that would be a good fight for any fighter at super middleweight who fights at a high level, and especially for Saul Alvarez, who's coming off a fight versus Gennady Golovkin, who's never fought higher than at middleweight, and who's past his prime, who's past the age of 40. He's not as durable as before. When he was in his prime, he doesn't carry the same power as he once carried in his prime. And Canelo Alvarez getting that victory in his last fight in their trilogy bout before the John Ryder fight isn't the most impressive comeback fight from that loss that he took versus Dmitry Bivol, which isn't a bad look at all. Dmitry Bivol is a young, fresh fighter who's in his prime, who is highly level, and who is highly technically sound, and who is the bigger fighter, Dmitry Bivol, fights at light heavyweight. Canelo Alvarez, he's fought at light heavyweight and has been a former champion at that weight class, but he did it versus a past prime Sergey Kovalev, who isn't as fresh and isn't or wasn't in his prime like Dmitry Bivol was when Canelo Alvarez fought him. And I gotta give Saul Alvarez his credit for challenging arguably the best fighter at that weight class to try and become a two-time light heavyweight champion. It was a great effort by Alvarez, and him having that fight versus Bivol, that L is not a bad look at all. It actually makes him look more courageous than anything. And honestly, Saul Alvarez has fought them all from when he was competing at super lightweight, and he fought the best at welterweight as well as he did at super welterweight and at middleweight and at super middleweight. The only fighters that I say he hasn't fought yet in super middleweight is David Benavidez, who is a undefeated fighter, who's a former WBO super middleweight champion. I say he's the number one ranked contender in super middleweight. I say that's really the only intriguing fight that Saul Alvarez has left, and everybody else he's fought already. I don't know if he wants to have another fight versus Dmitry Bivol, and I don't think that's necessary. I don't think Alvarez has anything to prove. He will go down arguably as one of the best Mexican fighters to ever come out of Mexico. And I say Benavidez, him wanting to obviously get the title back that he never lost, that would be a fight that I say Canelo Alvarez only has left, and many boxing fans will want to see Canelo Alvarez make happen. And then Demetrius Andrade as well, who's an undefeated former super welterweight and middleweight champion who's been calling out Saul Alvarez for a long time. He hasn't been able to make himself a notable name in the sport of boxing because of the quality of opponents that he's fought throughout his career. Lately, he's been making more of a noise in the scene amongst the top of the general boxing public, and then it's been rumored that Andrade and Benavidez might fight each other sometime later this year, and then the winner of that will get the fight versus Saul Alvarez, depending if he defends his undisputed super middleweight title successfully versus the undisputed super welterweight champion Jermell Charlo in his next fight. As I said, that's the only fight that Canelo Alvarez, I think, has left in his career. It's either, I'd say definitely that fight versus David Benavidez, and if Demetrius Andrade beats Benavidez, when or if they fight, then Canelo versus Andrade would be a good look for Canelo Alvarez, and as well as Andrade as well. And if he wants to rematch Dmitry Bivol, I say go for it. And Jermell Charlo, he's fighting him next month. Depending on how that fight goes, I say the more fight that makes sense for Alvarez would have been a fighter that fights regularly at the same division that he competes at, that being super middleweight, obviously that either being Benavidez or Andrade. Andrade just recently made his debut at super middleweight, and Jermell Charlo, he fights two divisions under super middleweight. That's why I say it would have made more sense if Alvarez would have fought either Benavidez or Andrade. However, I'm not complaining. It's still a compelling bout that we got next month coming up with him and with Alvarez and Charlo, and then Benavidez and Andrade. That fight, either of those fighters challenging Alvarez for his undisputed super middleweight title would have been more of a compelling bout from my perspective at least. Anyways, and then the number 7 ranked pound for pound fighter is the current undefeated WBA light heavyweight champion, Dmitry Bivol. He's undefeated. He's proven himself when he defeated Gerardo Ramirez in his last fight, who was formerly undefeated prior to facing Dmitry Bivol. And he made a splash amongst the general public when he defeated, as I said, arguably the most notable fighter in the world, that being Saul Alvarez, and then him beating a former undefeated veteran, former champion fighter in Ramirez is also a good look. And he's technically sound. He's got a high ring IQ. He's got good fundamentals, good abilities in the ring, and he's definitely in the prime of his career, and he's on the come up, and he's not the undisputed light heavyweight champion if he gets that mega fight to potentially become an undisputed light heavyweight champion versus his fellow countryman Artur Beterbiev, who is the only other light heavyweight champion. If that fight does happen, which hopefully it does, I would have him ranked at a higher ranking. However, I think this is a suitable ranking as of right now for Dmitry Bivol, and he's at the best shape of his career right now, and looking forward to seeing much more from Dmitry Bivol. And then at number 8, I have the other light heavyweight champion, Artur Beterbiev, who has all his wins via knockout. I talked about how technically sound, and Dmitry Bivol, I'm talking about him having high fundamental skills and him having good skills and good abilities to score wins in the ring. Artur Beterbiev, he is more known for his power than his technical ability. As I said, he has all his wins via knockout. He's hard-hitting. And Artur Beterbiev, he's undefeated. He's not as fresh and as young as Dmitry Bivol. He's older. He's closer to his 40s than his 20s. And Artur Beterbiev, I have him, the current light heavyweight champion, who's got an impressive resume and who's fought a good amount of high-level competition at light heavyweight. I have him ranked at number 8 in the current pound-for-pound rankings. And at number 9, I have Gervonta Davis ranked as a number 9 ranked pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. He's been a household name, and arguably he is the most notable American fighter out there right now, currently in the sport of boxing. He's got a fan-friendly style. He's exciting. He's explosive. He's got knockout power, and that's what gravitates the general public to him. He's got a bright personality, and he's a draw in the sport of boxing. He's a former featherweight and super featherweight champion, and ever since he moved up to lightweight, he hasn't been recognized as the official world champion ever since he moved up to lightweight, and he's also fought at super lightweight as well. However, he's been collecting important, impressive wins. He fought the toughest competition of his career thus far in his last fight, and he had that highlight reel knockout win over Ryan Garcia, a longtime rival who's been on the same climb amongst the top ranks of the sport of boxing as one of the most recognizable names in the sport of boxing. And for Gervonta Davis to get a win versus somebody on the same come up as him is definitely a good look for Gervonta Davis. And as I said, he hasn't been champion ever since moving up to lightweight. However, he, I would say, is more of a draw and more of a notable name than the only champion at lightweight, that being Devin Haney, and that makes him a household name, I would say, in the lightweight division and as well as for the general public in the sport of boxing. And him getting that win versus Ryan Garcia in his last fight definitely elevated him amongst the top of the ranks in the pound-for-pound rankings in the sport of boxing. And at number 10, I had the current or not current, former unified super featherweight champion, the undefeated, highly skilled Shakur Stevenson. From what he's been able to produce and what he's showing when he stepped in the ring, his abilities, his technical skills, his fundamentals is a very high level. I would say is top notch. Shakur Stevenson, his game is very sharp, and in his last fight, he didn't fight a high-quality opponent for his debut fight at lightweight. However, in his next fight, I'm sure he will fight a more notable opponent, a higher-leveled opponent in his second fight at lightweight, and then he could yet again display his impressive skills in the ring. And arguably, technically speaking, when it comes to fundamentals, you could put Shakur Stevenson up there with the best of them. And his resume is impressive. The way he's defeated all his opponents is impressive as well. And that's why I currently have Shakur Stevenson, a former unified super featherweight champion, who made an impressive debut at lightweight. And then I'm sure he's going to continue making more noise at lightweight, and then hopefully he intends to become a champion in the future at lightweight, which is most likely going to happen. I have him currently ranked as the number 10 fighter in the top 10 pound-for-pound rankings in the sport of boxing, and that is my current top 10 pound-for-pound rankings in the sport of boxing halfway through 2023. Now moving on, I will be giving y'all my post-fight thoughts on all the fights that happened tonight. The first fight I'll be giving y'all my post-fight thoughts on was for the WBO Super Featherweight title between the champion Emmanuel Navarette and the former undefeated Super Featherweight champion Oscar Valdez. Now, this fight was highly anticipated, both fighters being well-recognizable fighters in the sport of boxing, and that's why this fight was looked forward to by the boxing public. And both fighters, I would say, are fan-friendly styled fighters, and hence why this fight was being anticipated as going to be one of the better fights for a very successful year that 2023 has been able to produce thus far. And this definitely didn't disappoint. Matchmaking-wise, I would say it's been up there to be one of the more fan-friendly affairs that the sport of boxing can produce, and is definitely one of those fights that the boxing fans would very much demand. And we got to see one of these mega fights come into fruition tonight with Navarette and Valdez. And Navarette, he made his debut at super featherweight in his last fight when he defeated Liam Wilson in his debut fight at super featherweight to become the WBO super featherweight champion when he stopped Liam Wilson. And he is a 3-divisional champion, and he was a champion at super bantamweight and at featherweight, and now he's the current WBO super featherweight champion. And he moved up to super featherweight at the perfect time because Shakur Stevenson, the only man who was able to defeat Oscar Valdez, he vacated his WBO and WBC super featherweight titles for him to move up to lightweight, leaving a vacancy space in the super featherweight division. Hence why it was a perfect opportunity for Emmanuel Navarette to move up to super featherweight to become a 3-divisional champion, which is a good accomplishment in the sport of boxing that will make him a very well achieved fighter in the sport. And he took on tonight Oscar Valdez, the former undefeated super featherweight champion. And after suffering his first loss versus Shakur Stevenson, he had a bounce back fight versus Adam Lopez, and he won via unanimous decision. And it was a decent performance. We've seen better from Valdez. However, it was a bounce-back fight for him to prepare to challenge to hopefully become champion once again. And he got his shot tonight versus Emmanuel Navarette. And before I give y'all the summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell y'all the results first. And Emmanuel Navarette was able to retain his WBO Super Featherweight title after he won the fight via unanimous decision. And it was a brilliant performance by Emmanuel Navarette. I personally had the fight score 116 and 112 in favor of Emmanuel Navarette. And Navarette, as I said, he fought a good fight. It was a good performance for his first title defense, I say, versus the toughest opponent that he's faced thus far in his career. And definitely, I would say, was a tougher challenge than his first fight at Super Featherweight, and that was versus Liam Wilson. Liam Wilson is more of a one-dimensional fighter, and he was looking for a big shot to end the fight to hopefully catch Emmanuel Navarette and drop him once again, because Emmanuel Navarette, in his first fight at Super Featherweight, he got a important learning experience as well, because much like how it was his first fight at Super Featherweight, in his pro career, it was his first time tasting the canvas when he was badly hurt and dropped in the middle of the fight. And then Emmanuel Navarette was able to gain back his composure and score a TKO win to become the WBO Super Featherweight champion. And as well as in that fight versus Liam Wilson, he was able to show his intelligence and his in-ring IQ as he was able to buy time to gain back his composure when he spat out his mouth guard, which was illegal. However, the referee didn't catch Emmanuel Navarette doing that, hence why Navarette was able to gain back his footing and his balance with the time that he was able to buy via doing that. And however, in this fight versus Valdez, he did not taste the canvas. He outworked Valdez. He outlanded Valdez. He outthrew Valdez. He did the more efficient work, and he was accurate with his shots. He was able to attack from different angles. And Oscar Valdez, who is more technically sound and is more fundamental than Liam Wilson and is more than one-dimensional than Liam Wilson, Oscar Valdez, he's known for his aggression and his pressure and his work rate as well. However, his sharpness is underrated. His technicality as well is underrated, because he's able to pick at his opponents and time his opponents and catch his opponent's rhythm and counter their attacks with efficient counterpunching and accurate flush shots. However, in this fight, Emmanuel Navarette has built a reputation of having a awkward style and having a untelegraphical rhythm, and as well as attacking from weird angles, which makes it difficult for his opponents to telegraph and to catch and to estimate the rhythm and the attack and the offense of the high volume punching, aggressive come forward fighter Emmanuel Navarette is known as. And Emmanuel Navarette, as I said, he is a come forward fighter, a pressure fighter, an aggressive fighter. He doesn't go backwards or move laterally. Instead, he always comes forward at his opponents. He's known for his reach advantage. He's got a long arms, and he doesn't utilize the reach advantage or the jab that much. He throws a lot more punches, and he adds pressure that way via marching forward at his opponents and attacking relentlessly with combinations of punches, then to establish the jab to set a distance with him and his opponents. And it was the same in this fight. Emmanuel Navarette threw over 1,000 punches, throwing over 600 more punches than Oscar Valdez. And that goes to show, if y'all compared to punch stats, Emmanuel Navarrete definitely was a busier fighter, which looks good to the judges because the judges don't get a look at the punch stats. They only get to catch what's going on with the live action in the ring, and they tend to favor the aggressor more times than the less aggressive fighter, hence why that favors a fighter with the style that Emmanuel Navarrete possesses. And Oscar Valdez had a hard time catching where the attacks was coming from angle-wise, and as well as timing Emmanuel Navarrete because of his work rate and because of how much punches he was throwing. And it was hard for Valdez to catch the rhythm of Navarrete, to telegraph his attacks and to counter his shots. And because Navarrete wouldn't give him any room or any breathing ground for Valdez to throw punches in between Navarrete's punches. And Navarrete's fought a brilliant tactical fight in this fight. Valdez did have his moments. However, Navarrete, he was composed in this fight. He was reacting very well to the shots of Valdez. And Valdez, I would say, he's been through many wars. He is a fighter that takes punches to give back punches. That's the style of Valdez. He likes to get fires lit up under him for him to hit his opponents with hotter fire. And that's the aggressive counterpunching style of Oscar Valdez. However, Navarrete, as I said, prior to this fight, I was predicting that Valdez, being the more technically sound fighter than Liam Wilson, and Liam Wilson was able to catch Navarrete with some efficient shots. I thought Valdez would do a better job at catching Navarrete with more efficient counter punches and hit him with some good powerful shots to force Navarrete back and to move other than forward in this fight. However, Navarrete, who hasn't been through as many wars as Valdez and hasn't shown the endurance and the durability and his ability to absorb shots as well as Valdez, I thought that factor would be an advantage going towards Oscar Valdez. However, Navarrete in tonight's fight showed the difference as he was able to show his durability and his ability to absorb shots and react to them very well, because whenever Valdez looked like he landed a significant shot on Navarrete, Navarrete was able to react well and go right back onto the attack, and he, I would say, had the better reactions to Valdez's attacks and the other way around, as Navarrete, y'all can credit his volume and his work rate and his activity for the mark that he left on Valdez after the fight. However, you got to give some credit to Emmanuel Navarrete for his ability to be accurate and to be able to find his target in this fight versus Valdez. And I'm looking forward to seeing Emmanuel Navarrete's reign as the WBO Super Featherweight champion, and he's definitely moved up on my pound-for-pound ranking. He's not on the top 10 list as of yet. I would say he's definitely on the top 20 pound-for-pound rankings for sure. And what would be next for Emmanuel Navarrete? I think the Super Featherweight's got a good seed right now. A title unification doesn't sound like a bad idea. The other champion that's Super Featherweight is Joe Cordina, who's the current WBC and WBA title unification bout would be the easier bout to make as far as title unification bouts go in the super featherweights. If a cross-promotional fight can happen with Navarette and Joe Cordina for the IBF and WBO super featherweight title, Joe Cordina is promoted by a English promoter. Joe Cordina is a Welsh fighter. Emmanuel Navarette, he's promoted by Top Rank. And if that fight can happen where two different promotions can work with each other to make this title unification bout happen, and they did say during the post-fight interview that a rematch, both fighters wouldn't have a problem having another fight. I think it would most likely go the same way as it did the first time. I think Navarette's style proved to be more efficient, and I think it'll be the same story if they do in fact have a rematch. The WBO, how they got their rankings, Archie Sharp is next in line as the number one contender to challenge for the WBO Super Featherweight title. Archie Sharp is a undefeated fighter. He's 23-0 with 9 knockout wins. He is a prospect, and that would be a challenge for Emmanuel Navarette to take on a young unbeaten fighter by the name of Archie Sharp. And then it will be Albert Bell, Lamont Roach Jr., and that's how the WBO has ranked as far as the super featherweight division goes. And there is Shavaka Rakimov, who is a top 10 ranked super featherweight fighter. He has 17 wins, 14 wins via knockout. That's a high knockout ratio, and he's got 1 draw and 1 defeat. And he suffered his first defeat in a close competitive bout versus the IBF Super Featherweight champion, and he lost the IBF Super Featherweight title that way versus Joe Cordina. And I'm sure a rematch wouldn't be bad for Rakimov to fight versus Joe Cordina after his split decision loss. And as I said, to take on another former champion in his next bout, in his next hopeful title defense for the WBO Super Featherweight title, it would be a good look for him to take on yet another former undefeated champion. And then there's Robson Canseco, who had a close competitive bout versus Oscar Valdez, and what many people consider where Canseco could have won the fight. That would be a good challenge for Emmanuel Navarette as well, and that would be a easy fight for Top Rank to make happen, because Canseco has been fighting under the Top Rank banner for a while as well, and Canseco is a decorated amateur fighter, and as well as he is a well-experienced fighter who's been fighting amongst the top of the super featherweights for a while now. He's fought 2 former super featherweight champions, both Valdez and Shakur Stevenson, and I think that can be the easiest fight, and as well as a good challenge for Emmanuel Navarette. And when I say that can be an easy fight, I mean for it to make happen next for Emmanuel Navarette. If it's a good challenge, obviously it's not going to be a easy fight for Navarette to fight a fighter that's on the level of Robson Canseco. And then there is Kenichi Ogawa as well. He's he is well experienced as well, and he's a former super featherweight champion as well. That would be another good challenge for Navarette to put his title on the line against another former champion. And as well as there's Roger Gutierrez, who was a former WBA super featherweight champion as well. That would be a tough test for Navarette to put his WBO super featherweight title on the line versus next. Those are some potential bouts for Navarette to have next in his next fight. Anyways, moving on to the next fight. The next bout I will be giving my post-fight thoughts on was between the former unified heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius, a long-time heavyweight fighter, and I would say he is a level above a journeyman now. He's challenged for heavyweight titles before, and Robert Helenius, I would say, is on the same level as Dillian Whyte, who was originally scheduled to be Anthony Joshua's opponent. And Dillian Whyte has already fought and lost to Anthony Joshua before, and that's when he was more fresher and younger. So Dillian Whyte, at the stage that he's at now, I would say he is definitely past his prime and isn't the same fighter he once was. And Dillian Whyte had a victory over Robert Helenius, but that was 6 years ago when he defeated Helenius, and that was before he fought Anthony Joshua the first time. And that's why I say Helenius wasn't a bad last-minute replacement opponent for Dillian Whyte. That's why I say they're both on the same level as far as skills go and as far as the timing goes, as both fighters are well past their prime and are at their post-retirement. And Anthony Joshua, he's been on the resurgence stage, I say, after his first defeat. He got knocked out versus Andy Ruiz in his U.S. debut, and that was back in 2019, and that was 2019's upset of the year. And I say he hasn't been the same fighter ever since then. And there's been criticism on Anthony Joshua's game and his fundamentals before that fight, when he got dropped by Vladimir Klitschko, who is, I would say, one-dimensional. However, he's got a style that is efficient, and Vladimir Klitschko, his legacy does seem to get disrespected a lot because of the lack of quality opponents. However, he's had, I would say, arguably somewhat the most successful heavyweight title reign, not only in recent boxing history, but in all of heavyweight boxing history. And his style might be boring. He's got that jab, straight, and clinch style, using his body mass and his height and weight advantage on his opponent, and utilizing that reach advantage and that long frame of his to have him not be able to get hit versus his opponents. And it's boring. However, it works though. And because this is heavyweight boxing, just because that style seems like not like the exciting, explosive Mike Tyson kind of style, doesn't mean that power is lacking, because, as I said, this is heavyweight boxing, and the heavier weight, more body mass carrying figures tend to have more power, and any punch from a heavyweight fighter possesses knockout threats. And when Vladimir Klitschko, who was past his prime, who already had lost in the Klitschko era, was considered to be over when Tyson Fury defeated Vladimir Klitschko for the unified heavyweight titles, when he was able to drop and hurt Anthony Joshua badly, then people were questioning the durability and the chin of Anthony Joshua, and as well as stamina, because Joshua, when he was on the come up, he never made it to the championship rounds. He would always look to please the crowd and go for the highlight reel knockouts and look to finish his opponents as early as possible and go head hunting and not show off his fundamentals. Rather, he would look to score knockouts and look for, as I said, highlight reel moments. And that left a lot of questions in the air to the boxing public when it came to Anthony Joshua's abilities in the ring. And then he had yet another questionable performance versus Joseph Parker where he went the distance, yet he looked disappointing because you can't please everybody, especially when it comes to the fans and the critics, because they want to see Anthony Joshua pull off a perfect performance where it's well balanced, where he shows off good technical abilities and good fundamental skills, and as well as pull off that knockout where he's built a reputation of being a exciting, entertaining fighter that has catapulted him to the draw that he is today. And his stamina as well has been in question because he tends to gas out easily, and that I would say has to do with his frame because of his muscle mass and the way he's built, and that comes with heavier weight fighters. They're less durable than the lighter weight fighters, and because when they swing and get active, they throw more weight behind those shots, and that takes more of a toll on the heavier weight fighters than the lesser weight fighters, because it's easier for the lesser weight fighters to be fluid and more mobile because they carry less body mass. And the way Joshua is built, he's built like a bodybuilder, and he has so much muscles that it takes a toll on him and it wears him out when he works at a high rate. And ever since his first defeat versus Andy Ruiz, he's been more careful. And then he took yet another defeat versus Alexander Usyk, and he's been bouncing around from different trainers to work on his game and to be an actual student of the game and to get different tutelages and to add different adjustments to improve on his skills in the ring. And he's been trying to show different sides of his technical abilities in the ring ever since his first defeat. I would say really he lost that first fight versus Usyk, then he lost the rematch as well, and then in his last fight versus Jermaine Franklin, that was more of a drag-on fight, and it reminded me a lot of the Joseph Parker fight. He's being more technically minded when he fights now. He tends to save his energy a lot more than the earlier stages of his career. He's more strategized when it comes to his in-ring game plan than we're used to seeing him. Anthony Joshua wants to look forward to fighting the whole 12 rounds than to go hunting for the knockout or highlight reel moments like we're used to seeing him. He's less explosive. He's thinking about saving the energy in his gas tank to spread out his stamina correctly for the whole fight instead of trying to finish out his opponents. And he's trying out different aspects when it comes to fundamentals in boxing. And I would say that's a good look for Anthony Joshua because he's trying to show different sides and trying to improve in the whole game of boxing instead of being one-dimensional and being solely focused on scoring knockouts and trying to keep up with the reputation, instead being more of a efficient fighter to get the wins instead of trying to be a crowd pleaser. Because Anthony Joshua, whether he's a champion or not, he's still one of the biggest draws in the sport of boxing and is definitely the household name out there in England as their top heavyweight. obviously, other than Tyson Fury, who is the lineal heavyweight champion, and he is a fighter from England as well. And Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius, how the fight went. Before I give you out a summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell you out the results. Anthony Joshua was able to win this fight via 7th round knockout, and I did guess that Anthony Joshua will win this fight via knockout in the 7th round. Now, if I was a betting man and if I would have betted on this fight, I would have won some money. Anyways, though, that's besides the point. Anthony Joshua, he fought how I expected him to fight. It was a virtual shutout prior to the knockout. Robert Helenius, as I said, he is not a fast fighter. He's got a sneaky counter-punching style. He's a slow, methodical fighter, and he takes a while to find his rhythm and to get in tune and to find his game plan and what game to execute for him to be successful in the fight versus his opponent. He likes to telegraph and to read his opponent's game to get his game plan going. However, he couldn't read Anthony Joshua's game, and Anthony Joshua, who can be a fast starter if he wants to be, especially when he's on aggressive timing and when he's looking to headhunt and to score a vicious knockout. He could get in tune very early when he's focused on what he's focused on. However, as I said, he's trying to master different elements in this game of boxing as of late. And Anthony Joshua was, I would say, warming up to save his not only his energy, but to, I guess, gain more experience as how he's been fighting as of late. It reminded me a lot of his last fight versus Jermaine Franklin, where he's composed and he's relaxed and he's establishing the jab and trying to figure out what would be the best range for him to fight at and setting up the pace and the tone for the remainder of the fight and seeing where he could score the knockout from and what punch works the best for him and what angle he should attack from and how he's going to push his opponents and how he's going to dictate the fight. And that's what he was doing. He was playing around and toying around, and it looked more like a sparring before the knockout happened. And in the 7th round, Anthony Joshua, he methodically, I think, planned out how the knockout was going to happen. And that goes to show improvements when it comes to ring IQ on the part of Anthony Joshua, as he threw a pro punch to the body, a jab to the body without the intent of it having any effect, and it was more of a setup punch for the overhand right hand to come over on the top of the fake out jab of Anthony Joshua that he threw to the body to get the guard of Robert Helenius down to land that devastating overhand right hand. And it was a one-punch knockout, much like how Deontay Wilder scored that knockout versus Robert Helenius in the first round in Deontay Wilder's last fight. And speaking of Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, they were on the come up at the same time and were champions at the same time. And the public has been calling for Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder to fight each other since then. And now that they are still one of the biggest draws in heavyweight boxing currently, that was still called for a huge mega fight. And that's the fight that many people are saying can be next and should be next for both fighters. Deontay Wilder has been out of action for almost a year now. And the last time he fought was against Robert Helenius last year at Fall. And that wasn't really much of a fight because Deontay Wilder made quick work of him and knocked him out in the first round. And Anthony Joshua, he stays more busier than Deontay Wilder. And that could be an advantage to Anthony Joshua. And Anthony Joshua has already had 2 fights this year. And Anthony Joshua, he's voiced his interest in wanting to make that fight happen versus Deontay Wilder. And as I said, Deontay Wilder, I would say, is the biggest draw when it comes to American heavyweights, without a doubt. And Anthony Joshua, other than Tyson Fury, is the biggest draw in the UK when it comes to heavyweight boxing, if not the second biggest draw when it comes to all of English boxing. And whether the fight happens in America or England, it's going to be a sellout fight either ways. And I think that fight should be next after Deontay Wilder gets another fight to prepare himself for a fight of this magnitude versus Anthony Joshua. I say he could fight another PBC heavyweight fighter. A tough fight would be versus Andy Ruiz. I would say he's on the same level as Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. And Andy Ruiz has been staying busy ever since he lost the unified heavyweight titles in a rematch versus Anthony Joshua. And from my personal opinion, I think Andy Ruiz deserved a trilogy bout versus Anthony Joshua because they're tied at 1 wins each versus each other. And Andy Ruiz did say he lost focus and didn't prepare himself well for the rematch versus Anthony Joshua after he pulled off what was considered the biggest upset of 2019. And he was soaking up that win and that notoriety that he got from that victory versus Anthony Joshua in their first fight, that he was more caught up in that moment than to defend being the unified heavyweight champion. And I think it hasn't been fair that Ruiz didn't get a shot to become heavyweight champion once again. And I think a third fight is still intriguing with Anthony Joshua. And Andy Ruiz versus Deontay Wilder has been up for discussion for a while now, and it would be an easy fight to make happen, and it would be a fight of a huge magnitude as well, because both fighters being American heavyweights that's well recognized. It would be a sellout fight anywhere in America if Ruiz and Wilder were to fight each other, and it would be a tough test for both former heavyweight champions. And if not, Wilder can fight another heavyweight fighter who's been a contender amongst the heavyweights for a while now. There's heavyweights that we can think of that can fight Deontay Wilder next. However, as I said, the fight to make happen, and that would be the biggest fight, bigger than the Wilder-Ruiz fight, would be a fight with Wilder and Joshua. Moving on to the next fights, Showtime had a card tonight as well, and Gary Antuanne Russell, who is a up-and-coming prospect. If you're a boxing fan, I'll definitely say keep a lookout on Gary Antuanne Russell. He improved his record to 17-0, and he has all his wins via knockout, and he is definitely a sensation to look out for. When you hear records like that, when you have a fighter who has all his wins via knockout, that rings a bell to the general public, and that is what fans in general look forward to a fighter. They consider that to be exciting when it comes to combat sports. And Gary Antuanne Russell has been building a reputation as a top prospect in the whole sport of boxing. He is a super lightweight. The Russell family, all the Russell Juniors, all the Gary Russell Juniors, they are boxers. They're a boxing family, and as y'all know, the featherweight fighter, former champion there, he's the most well-known Gary Russell. And now Gary Antuanne Russell is on the come-up to be the next most well-known Gary Russell in the sport of boxing. And he scored a first-round knockout versus a former undefeated fighter by the name of Cruz. He was able to knock him out with a body shot. And Gary Antuanne Russell, I would say now, is definitely a top 10 ranked super lightweight. Now, is he ready to challenge for any of the super lightweight titles? No, the super lightweights, they got a good scene, and I would say it's one of the most competitive divisions in the sport right now. I would say he should be considered, if not top 10, at least top 15 best super lightweights currently active in the sport of boxing right now. And I would say if you put him up against a fighter the likes of a Rolando Romero, he has a strong chance at becoming champion at 140 if he fights somebody of the caliber of a Rolly Romero. I don't think he's ready for either a Teofimo Lopez, Regis Progress, or even a Matias or Ryan Garcia or Josh Taylor and Devin Haney, who recently announced that he will be moving up to super lightweight. I think it's because he hasn't fought any top-level opponents as of yet. He's still at the building stages of his career, and he is ranked by the WBC as the number 2 ranked contender, and he is ranked as a number 7 ranked fighter by the Ring magazine. So he is considered to be definitely a top contender amongst the super lightweights. And as I said, look forward to him. He's got an exciting style. He's explosive, and he is highly skilled. And best is yet to come for Gary Antuanne Russell. And then the main event featured Emmanuel Rodriguez versus Melvin Lopez for the vacant IBF Bantamweight title. Now, the Bantamweights, they got a new scene going on right now because the former undisputed Bantamweight champion Naoya Inoue vacated his undisputed Bantamweight titles after he decided to move up to Super Bantamweight. And now there's Takuma Inoue, who's the brother of Naoya Inoue. He's the WBA Bantamweight champion. And Jason Maloney is the WBO Bantamweight champion after he recently won versus Vincent Astrolabio via majority decision when he won the vacant WBO Bantamweight title a few months ago. And now the current IBF Bantamweight champion, newly crowned IBF Bantamweight champion after tonight, is Emmanuel Rodriguez. He's a veteran at the Bantamweight division. He competed in the Bantamweight tournament in the World Boxing Super Series. He fought Naoya Inoue, and that was, I think, in the semifinals when he took on Naoya Inoue, and he defeated Melvin Rodriguez in a very one-sided fight. It was pretty much a shutout. All the judges had it for Emmanuel Rodriguez via a wide margin. I had to score 120 to 106 in favor of Rodriguez. Rodriguez outworked him, outlanded him, and he dropped him twice in the 12th and final round. And he tried to finish off Lopez. However, Lopez was able to endure and survive the 12th and final round to make it to the distance. However, as I said, it was one-sided. Lopez did have his moments here and there where he would land some flush shots. However, Rodriguez received them well, and Rodriguez would do the more efficient work, and he did a good job at mixing up his punches and level changing from upstairs and downstairs. And the veteran Rodriguez, the older fighter, I expected Melvin Lopez, who is a efficient body puncher and a high volume punching, aggressive, come forward fighter as well, and he's the more younger, fresher fighter. I thought he would do the better work in this fight, and I was favoring Lopez to win. However, tonight Rodriguez proved me wrong, and now he's the new IBF Bantamweight champion, and now this is how the Bantamweight division looks. Emmanuel Rodriguez, he won, he won 2 back-to-back fights. He knocked out Roberto Cantu a year ago, and then he defeated Gary Antonio Russell via technical decision. And then now he wins 3 in a row via a dominant performance where he defeats Melvin Lopez to become the new IBF Bantamweight champion. And what can be next for Rodriguez? He could maybe try and avenge that close split decision loss versus Raymar Caballo. And that fight was from back in 2020. It was for the vacant WBC interim Bantamweight title. And then there is Takuma Inoue if he wants to go for a unification bout. And then there's Jason Maloney. Jason Maloney is a exciting fighter and can produce fan-friendly style fights, as well can Emmanuel Rodriguez. And that's what is good about the lighter weight classes. They tend to throw more fan-friendly affairs than the heavier weight fighters. It's that the public tends to tap more into the heavier weight fighters because for whatever reason, to the sight, to the eyes of the fans, they like to see bigger looking guys trying to impose their will on each other when the lighter weight class fighters can be more active and more durable and can produce more fireworks than the heavier weight fighters and can work more than the heavier weight fighters because they're lighter on their feet and because they're lighter in body mass. They can throw a lot more than the heavier weight fighters, and that's what fans tend to look for, is that aggressive style of fighting where fighters are producing a high work rate rather than a slow, methodical pace of a fight. And as I said, I'm sure that close fight versus Caballo, Rodriguez, where he lost that fight versus Caballo, he would, I'm sure, like to get a rematch versus him. And the number 1 ranked contender by the IBF is Vincent Astrolabio. And that is a fight that can potentially be next. He's scheduled to fight in Thailand. He fights more over there in the East, and he had a close majority decision loss versus Maloney for the vacant WBO Bantamweight title. So we know that Astrolabio is a top-ranked Bantamweight fighter. So if he's successful versus Kaikana in his next fight, which is coming up later this month over there in Thailand, then that could potentially be a next fight for the first title defense for Emmanuel Rodriguez. And then there is, Donaire, he's going to retire after his last fight where he was unsuccessful at getting the W in, and that was against Alexandro Santiago, and that was for the vacant WBC Bantamweight title. And if Santiago wouldn't mind having a title unification bout versus Emmanuel Rodriguez, and both fighters had their last fight with PBC and Showtime, so that shouldn't be a hard fight to make if a title unification bout happens. And a unification title bout is always a good, healthy look for the sport. And with the year 2023 and this year producing the best fights possible that the sport can make, that all the fans has been asking for, I'm sure it would fit right along with the flow of how this year is going for the sport of boxing. if another title unification bout happens with this fresh resurgence that's going on in the bantamweight scene. And that's my post-fight thoughts with all the fights that happened tonight. And as I said, speaking of 2023, with all the mega fights that's been happening in the sport of boxing, I say this is the best year in the modern era. I would say this year is better than any year during the Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao era and the fresh resurgence era of the post Mayweather Pacquiao era when they retired, and then the Canelo Alvarez era. And I would say right now the scene of boxing is the most competitive it's ever been, and it's got a long list of highly skilled and high level fighters fighting each other, and we're seeing all the marquee matchups happening in the sport of boxing. And another fight that I forgot to talk about, I know I said during my revealing of the new updated pound for pound rankings, I said the Errol Spence Terence Crawford fight happened last week. It was 2 weeks ago that the Terence Crawford Errol Spence fight happened. Pardon me on that, y'all, because the week prior to tonight was a unmemorable night of boxing. It was an exhibition bout going on with Jake Paul and Nate Diaz, and I didn't even see any clips or any highlights of the Paul Diaz fight. I know Paul won the fight via decision, and even though it's considered a professional bout, it's more of an exhibition bout where a celebrity by the name of Jake Paul and many other celebrities and vloggers like KSI and other celebrities as well, other athletes and former MMA fighters and other celebrities, singers and actors, they've been competing in boxing as well to be relevant amongst the public, and that brings attention to the crowd, to the sport of boxing, and hopefully whoever taps into those events can be attracted to the sport of boxing and can lead the future generation to want to get involved with the sport, and that could spark a interest amongst the public to tap into the sport of boxing. Now that's a good look for the sport of boxing. And as far as exhibition bouts, that's why I don't have problems when it comes to these kind of things. And the real professional boxing fight that happened on that same card of Paul and Diaz was Amanda Serrano defending her featherweight titles versus Hardy, where she virtually shut out Hardy and she successfully defended her featherweight titles. Amanda Serrano is one of the best female fighters currently active in the sport of boxing right now, and she is well recognized as a top women's champion in boxing, and she is under the same banner as Jake Paul, hence why she fights on the same card as Jake Paul whenever he throws a fight. And Amanda Serrano, this was yet another successful title defense for her featherweight titles. However, the big fight that she's chasing after is a rematch with her and Katie Taylor. However, that rematch has been postponed, and that was considered the fight of the year of last year, in my opinion, where Katie Taylor won the fight via majority decision, and that fight of the year for 2022 was scheduled for earlier this year. However, Serrano had to pull out of that fight, and Chantel Cameron happened to be the last-minute replacement opponent for Amanda Serrano that stepped up and fought Katie Taylor, and she pulled off what was still considered and is still considered one of the biggest upsets of this year thus far, and she took the undisputed lightweight titles from one of the most recognizable female fighters by the name of Katie Taylor in Katie Taylor's hometown. As y'all know, the first fight was Serrano and Taylor was in New York, the hometown of Amanda Serrano, hence why the rematch was scheduled to be in Ireland, the hometown of Katie Taylor, and Chantel Cameron being from England, not too far away from Ireland. She stepped up and defeated Katie Taylor for her undisputed lightweight titles in Katie Taylor's hometown, adding a little bit more of a sting to that loss to Katie Taylor. Hence why Katie Taylor is immediately rematching Chantel Cameron to gain back her undisputed lightweight titles, and as well as her first defeat that happened in her hometown. And Chantel Cameron, that was a great performance by her, and she fought a brilliant fight. I talked about that fight and gave my post-fight reaction to that fight on a prior episode of Talk Boxing, and I'm definitely looking forward to another fight with Cameron and Taylor, because that was a good affair that we saw from their first fight earlier this year. And then Amanda Serrano, after she defeated Hardy last Saturday to successfully defend her featherweight titles, because that potential rematch, which most likely is going to happen versus Katie Taylor after Katie Taylor has that second fight versus Chantel Cameron. Besides that fight, now because that fight is on pause, there's talks of her fighting the other undisputed champion, and that being Alicia Baumgardner. She is considered one of the best female fighters currently active in the sport of boxing as well. She's an undisputed champion as well. And now there's talks amongst the public that these two, Amanda Serrano and Alicia Baumgardner, is going to meet in the ring sometime in the future. And that would be a mega fight. One of the biggest fights that female boxing can produce right now between two undisputed champions. And Baumgardner only is a weight class above Serrano. Serrano's the undisputed featherweight women's champion, while Baumgardner is the undisputed super featherweight champion. And Katie Taylor, who fights at lightweight, and I know I said she lost her undisputed lightweight titles. I have to make a correction. I just remembered that Taylor is still the undisputed lightweight women's champion. She challenged Chantel Cameron, who's a unified super lightweight women's champion, and she challenged for Chantel Cameron's titles, not the other way around. And I think in the second fight, I don't know if it's going to be competed at lightweight, and I don't know if Taylor's going to put up her undisputed lightweight crown, or if she's going to try and become a unified super lightweight champion in their second fight. And as I said, the Baumgardner Serrano fight would be a easier fight to make happen. I know it's not a problem for Serrano to fluctuate between featherweight to lightweight. However, she skips the super featherweight division, and it's only a one weight class step up for Serrano instead of two to make that fight happen with Baumgardner. And that's definitely a fight to look forward to. As I said, I say arguably the biggest and the best fight that the women's boxing can produce. And I say it's definitely the most competitive fight that the sport of boxing, when it comes to the women's department, can produce. And I would say that's definitely a fight to look out for and a match to make happen in the future. Anyways, with that being said, that does it for this episode of Talk Boxing. Y'all let me know what y'all opinions are on all the topics that I covered on this episode. And y'all go follow me on other platforms. The links will be in the description box below. And as well as click the link in the description to support this channel. It'll be very much appreciated. Comment, subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. And I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.